Welcome to our channel. Get ready to immerse yourself in a world of fear and danger. We are starting now.
Spring of 1943 was early in Western England. April turned out to be unusually warm. Several teenagers, taking their dogs with them, decided to take a walk in the woods, or at least that's what they told their parents. In reality, the kids were poaching and collecting wild duck eggs. They just didn't tell anyone about it. Unaware, the teenagers reached Hagley Wood, a place quite far from their home. The boys knew that this area had a bad reputation and that this land belonged to Lord Cobham. Whispers had it that the man had a nasty temper and despised uninvited guests. A teenager named Bob Farmer was not one to shy away from a challenge. The boy had no fear of the forest ranger, and on that day, Bob was determined not to return home empty-handed, whether it be a slain rabbit or a dozen duck eggs. He roamed everywhere he could in search of his prize. Suddenly, he stumbled upon an old willow tree, and an idea struck him, to look inside the tree for wild duck eggs. His friends tried to dissuade him, saying, where would they find duck eggs there? But the farmer didn't want to hear anything. The teenager confidently approached a huge old tree and began to climb it. His friends stood aside, silently watching what was happening. Suddenly, Bob screamed with joy. It turned out there was a large hollow inside the tree. The boy thought that the contents of this gigantic hollow could be very interesting. Bob began to clear the cavity of withered leaves and branches, hoping to find eggs there. What the teenager saw inside terrified him to death. There was a skull inside the tree. The farmer concluded that he was looking at the remains of a wild animal. Suddenly, the boy noticed hair and remnants of a jawbone on the skull. It became clear that he was looking at human remains. Bob got scared and started screaming at the top of his lungs. His friends thought something terrible had happened. Bob climbed down from the tree and told his friends about his horrifying discovery. The teenagers decided not to tell anyone about what Bob saw inside the old oak tree. Terrified, the kids ran out of Halliwood, eager to get away from the place. One of the boys tripped over an object and fell to the ground. As he got up, he saw that it was a fragment of a human hand. The kids promised each other to keep the terrifying secret. However, the youngest in the group, Tommy Willis, couldn't keep it to himself. He told his family about what happened, and the adults immediately went to the police. They found parts of the skeleton and that ill-fated hand. The news of the discovered remains quickly spread throughout the district and beyond. Panic ensued among the population. What happened, and for what reason? Who was the unfortunate woman? How to find the unknown maniac? Various assumptions spread, from the motives of the murder to a mystical ritual. Forensic expert James began studying the skeleton in the nearest city laboratory. After conducting the necessary procedures, he voiced what he could ascertain. The victim turned out to be a woman around 35 years old, who had given birth once. She had ash blonde hair, and her physique was delicate. Based on scant pieces of fabric, it was determined that her clothing was modest. Another, no less significant, discovery for the investigation was a wedding ring. At first glance, experts speculated that it was gold, but later they found out that it was gold-plated. In the oral cavity, a small piece of fabric from a dress was found, most likely a remnant of a gag. The mystery of how the hand became detached from the skeleton remained unsolved. Large animals couldn't tear her from the body and carry her away. For a human, there was no need for that. The most significant evidence for the operatives became three things. The most important trace was the victim's teeth. The forensic expert noticed an unusual bite and the crookedness of the teeth. One of them was so unique that it could protrude even when the lips were closed. There were signs of recent dental work, and much was said about the body's position. Its specifics allowed the expert to conclude that the victim was placed in the swamp immediately after the murder. Otherwise, post-mortem rigidity would not have allowed the criminal to carry out the intended act. The conclusive evidence turned out to be the victim's footwear, which was successfully identified. The place of shoe purchase and their manufacturer were determined. Unfortunately, even with these clues, the situation remained unclear, and there were still difficulties in identification. This was explained by the fact that the woman was not local, and investigators could not find either a dentist who had worked on the victim's teeth or a jeweler who had made her engagement ring. The presumed portrait of the deceased did not match any of the women considered missing throughout England. The investigative measures were carried out without rest. Thousands of photos of presumed women were processed, but the one. This graffiti has become something akin to today's memes, a unique feature of West England. You can find this phrase on various buildings in the county. The distinctive style that has become the artist's signature has been preserved over the years with the appearance of subsequent inscriptions. It is doubtful that these are the antics of the original author. Most likely, they are artificial. Followers are copying his handwriting. Many believe that the artist is already dead, just like the killer himself. The commotion surrounding the unexpectedly appearing inscriptions prompted the police to reopen the investigation. The best operatives were thrown off when they discovered unnoticed facts. The facts were thoroughly rechecked, but there was nothing to boast about. After a long and painstaking work, the employees put forward several theories about who Bella was and what happened to her. Theory 1. She was a woman of easy virtue who became the subject of a joke. This assumption turned out to be quite substantiated due to the available facts. In 1953, the police encountered unexpected information from a citizen of Unimosov, who claimed that her late husband, Jack Monser, had already died by that time, and he had reported a terrible crime. He confessed that he once met his friend of Dutch origin named Van Wright in one of the bars. A woman accompanied them. The companions treated her to alcoholic drinks, after which they decided to continue the pleasant conversation with obvious consequences. They headed to Peralta by car, but halfway there, the new acquaintance fell asleep, and the men decided to play a prank on the deeply sleeping lady by leaving her near a deserted tree in the area of Hagley Woods. After Jack Mosop's deed, haunting nightmares plagued him for the rest of his life about the disappeared woman pleading for help from within the depths of the tree. Due to the increasing frequency of nightmarish visions, the man lost his sanity. The logic of the theory falls apart because during the time of Jack's murder, he was undergoing treatment in a psychiatric clinic, and there was likely a similar case in the life of the insane person whose details became more vivid due to the unexpected discovery of the body. The condition itself added details to the consciousness, and no one knew anything about the Dutchman whom the patient constantly recalled. The police agreed that a foreigner could not have gone unnoticed in Jack's surroundings. Besides that, information about the murdered woman's profession has been doubted. Women of loose morals don't wear engagement rings, and such jewelry hinders attracting clients. Moreover, it could be a reason for a robbery. Theory number 2, she might be a German spy. This version seems paranoid, but it has a rational basis. If we delve into the realities, the crime scene, the Birmingham area in the 1940s, was considered desolate. However, there were secret military-industrial facilities there, a target for German bombers. It was crucial to gather as much precise information about these facilities as possible. Specially trained agents could assist in obtaining valuable information. According to intelligence data, British spies did exist, forming entire networks. While the full extent is not known, one member of the organization, a Nazi named Joseph Jacobs, was captured. He was parachuted, and a rough landing resulted in a leg injury. Due to this, he was quickly detected by intelligence in mid-August of the same year. He was executed, and all information about Jacobs was classified. In his testimony, there is information that he expected his wife, Clara Bauer, to be dropped in England. After the revealed facts, it is fair to assume that she was indeed Bella. The woman traveled extensively, performing on stage, earning a living through singing and dancing. After a prolonged stay in England, she developed a distinct local accent. So, Clara Bella became a valuable asset for the espionage network. After comparing details, this theory proved to be quite convincing, but certain inconsistencies were found in it. A vivid example is the photograph of Joseph Jacobs' wife. An attractive individual with a Hollywood smile was seen in it. However, a significant height difference was puzzling. People who had seen Clara claimed that she was tall, at least 180 centimeters. Bella, on the other hand, turned out to be a petite woman, just over 150 centimeters tall. Adding a twist to the story was the fact that, according to official information, the real Bauer died in 1942 in Germany. Another version suggests that she might have been just another spy who displeased her handler. The expected outcome was the woman's death at the hands of her own accomplices. However, here inconsistencies arise again. The choice of the location and methods of murder is more characteristic of the locals. Theory number 3, the victim of a local ritual. However, here inconsistencies arise again. The choice of the location and methods of murder is more characteristic of the locals. Theory number 3, the victim of a local ritual. The most fantastic theory was put forward on this topic by anthropologist Margaret Murray, who enjoyed unwavering authority. At that time, she believed that Belle was deprived of life by a religious fanatic. Her reputation, coupled with Hollywood itself, supported what she said. It was believed that secret rituals, known as shivashis, took place there for ages. And the scandalously famous witch's knot was considered Satan's place. The picture of the murder was perfectly clear. According to the rules of the occult ritual, the severed hand, presumably used for an artifact, the Hand of Glory, gained popularity among criminals who needed to infiltrate someone else's home. There existed a legend that if a lit candle were placed in a severed hand, the inhabitants of the house would immediately fall into a deep sleep, allowing the intruder to carry out their plan. Margaret Murray reminded people of this belief, connecting it to the fact that questionable individuals, specifically Irish gypsies, lived nearby in Hollywood. Theory number 4, witch hunt victim. In Hollywood, there was a strong fear of witches, although it was uncertain whether they actually practiced their rituals there. What was undisputed was that the population almost never doubted the existence of witches. At times, this conviction turned into a story. English farmers living in this area had made little progress in terms of development by the 1940s. Since the Middle Ages until the 18th century, it was customary for them to burn witches, and even 2 centuries later, they continued to believe in the existence of witchcraft. It is worth noting the local tradition of dealing with witches and sorcerers through vigilante justice without formalities. Farmers believed that crop failures, bad weather, poverty, accidents, and misfortunes occurred due to the casting of spells, and the only way to stop them was by shedding the blood of the one who cast the curse. In the neighboring Gloucestershire, around the same time, 74-year-old hired worker Charles Austrey was dealt with in this manner. The reason for this was attributed to the suspicion of him practicing witchcraft. Neighbors believed that the old man had the ability to cast spells on them. He was peculiar and kept to himself, leading to a brutal punishment. The unfortunate man was found in the middle of a field, pierced with pitchforks, an axe in his ribs, and a cross carved on his chest. From ancient times, English peasants settled scores with witches. In the west of England in 1944, a particularly bountiful harvest was seen as a curse. The villagers quickly found a culprit. Just 6 months before the tragedy, another witch, 75-year-old Anna Turner, met a similar fate to Charles in the same area. The peasants wanted her blood to seep into the ground and did so near the Rollright Stones, known as a site where Druids once gathered and considered a place of witches. Mysticism clouded the minds of these poor people whose resources were limited, relying solely on their labor. Locals couldn't recall the stranger, despite her distinct appearance. Perhaps to them, Bella was an Irish gypsy. This might explain why she was considered missing, but she was neither on the wanted list nor among the dental patients. The police do not receive statements from the gypsies, they do not visit dentists, they live in isolation from the rest of the world. Belief in something irrational helped shift the blame for the crop failure onto Gan's boots and forced resorting to lifting the curse. This could be done by a madman determined to verify the reality of rituals, but she was neither on the wanted list nor among the dental patients. The police do not receive statements from the gypsies, they do not visit dentists, they live in isolation from the rest of the world. Belief in something irrational helped shift the blame for the crop failure onto Gan's boots and forced resorting to lifting the curse. This could be done by a madman determined to verify the reality of rituals. The one who killed whom he considered a witch on the spot of presumed gatherings. This version explains why the killer did not take or sell the ring. His knowledge of the witch's connection could have endangered the girl due to the villagers' belief in mystical traditions. After her disappearance, the camp moved on to wander further. The concluding peculiarity of the story is that Bella's remains and all police materials related to the committed crime mysteriously disappeared. The disappearance occurred after the death of Professor Wesbury. The result was the inability to obtain the victim's DNA to establish her identity. The secret name of the person who placed the woman in the witch's noose remains.